My name is Oliver Pickard, and I've always dreamed of building my own car, together with my aerospace engineer and rallyist dad, Andrew.
Hello.
I found the perfect project.
This is my Cox GTM.
The remains of one of only 800 made.
And that looks bad, but when you look at it from the inside, it's even worse.
Crashed, fire damaged, rusted, unrestorable. We aren't just modifying, but completely re-engineering. We aren't just bolting on parts, we are making the tools that fabricate the parts to build my dream car. Bespoke, one of one. This is Project Mosquito. Hello!
Hello!
And welcome to the workshop! We're back!
Yay, it's been a while.
It's been a while, it has. In fact, according to all of the comments, it's been 9 months.
Oh no.
Yeah, it's like a baby. Right. But before we get stuck in, because many things have changed, right? We've been working well hard. We never stopped working, but it were all drudgery, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Lots of cold hours.
Lots of cold hours, me welding, and a bit more welding. And then some more welding.
It's been hard, hasn't it?
It has.
It's been hard. But before we get stuck into all of the changes, I just want to say a massive thank you to everybody who's written us a comment asking where the heck we are and if we're still alive.
Yeah,
we are still here, and we are
alive and kicking.
Alive. But thank you to everybody that's sent us like hundreds of messages, because when you're in here working away and you're doing stuff that's really laborious and that nobody really wants to watch, and it's not looking very different than it did, that really helped, didn't it?
Yeah.
So thank you. So your comments, we read every single one of them and they mean the world to us. So thank you so much. First biggest change is probably the knee bar. It's moved.
We've moved it up because you needed more room.
Yes, it's coming 20 mil.
Yeah, 20 mil. It makes more room for the steering column to get it in the exact perfect position, because ergonomically,
yes,
you're a little bit difficult.
Yes, I believe the technical term is lanky.
Yeah. So that's been done. We've also finished the front suspension.
Yep, it's got boxed front and inside, so now it's all super stiff.
Yep, in fact, it's super stiff. There'll be no need for any cross bracing or anything. What we've got to do now is...
Right, hang on. We've also seen welded the entire thing.
Yeah,
That's down.
hundreds of hours of welding.
Hundreds of hours of welding. And then what we've done is we have filed and sanded every weld. And we've done that. It'll no longer be like MSA approved or whatever as a roll cage, which doesn't really matter because it's not really a roll cage. People on Twitter have taken to calling this the space cock, because it's part monocoque and part space frame. But it's not a monocoque or a space frame, so it's a space cock apparently. Right. But anyway, so the reason why, one, it's not really a roll cage. No, it looks like a roll cage, but it's not. The other reason is that it makes it massively less prone to cracking.
Yeah.
Which this is an incredibly stiff chassis, or it will be when all the sills and panels and stuff go in. It will be massively stiff, and so we need to just keep an eye on it, because if I ever have a movement, and that's one of the reasons why we're painting this chassis grey as well, not black, because inspection is everything. If we ever have a moment, if we ever take it to a track day and have a bit of a do, you need to be able to check that everything's all right. Yeah. And it makes it less prone to cracking and easier to inspect for cracking, doesn't it?
Yep.
So that's the reason why we've done that, and it shaves off a load of weight.
Yeah.
Like, loads of weight. It's impressive how much weight that's actually shaved off.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. Right, so what have you been doing with suspension, dude?
Right, so what we've done with the suspension, when we first designed the whole car, we made a tolerance of plus or minus 1 millimetre, which is 40,000th of an inch in America. And so the whole thing is plus or minus 1 millimetre, except for the suspension. When we've come to the suspension, we've gone plus or minus half a millimetre, which is 20 thou. So it's plus or minus 20,000th of an inch. to keep the geometry as perfect as we could possibly get it, back and front. And so what we've got now is basically the perfect setup. We don't need adjustable anything.
1 second, right? For those who don't speak engineer, in like normal human terms, that means basically when an engineer makes something and creates a set of plans, no matter what the component is, it sets out plus or minus a set amount of wiggle room, because nothing is ever perfect. You know, if you go from a tool to a tool to a tool to a tool, each tool is made within tolerances, and so you might make two parts, they might not be exactly the same, but as long as they are made within the tolerances, the better. And the tighter those tolerances, so the less wiggle room you're allowed, the better the thing is. And we are plus or minus 0.5 millimeter on all the suspension, and that means not just plus or minus 0.5 millimeter in that upright and in that one, but in one to the other and in this one to this one, like it is bang on, innit?
Yeah. The plain fact is it's a test bed which is completely as good as it could humanly be made by hand.
So let's get stuck in, shall we?
Yep, let's get on it.
What first?
Front mounts.
Front mounts.
So this is a little gusset here, and basically instead of putting a washer on the back, we're just going to make an extra little brace which goes.
Whoever made that paper template for that gusset? Oh, chef's kiss. And you may notice as well that these upper wishbones have also had a lick of steel it, but then we've also clearanced them, so these need a second coat as well.
It just adds a bit more clearance for the spring on the coilover. When it's at full drop, full droop, and at full compression, we just clearance the back and the front. Well, that's in place now, so we can now weld this along this side. We'll tack it in place to start with, here, and underneath. Right, so now we've got our wishbone reinforcement brackets / washers /gussets in place. One tiny bit of metal, so many jobs.
Yep.
But now we're going to put in a cross piece from this mount to this mount, because this is on an aerostat then.
Yeah.
Right, so we've got a bend here, and obviously we've got a wishbone there, so we don't want the wishbone pushing inwards and bending the tube, because the tube's in bending. So what we need to do is put a cross piece in. We're going to be using inch box section, 25 millimeters.
And you don't like inch box, do you?
Don't really like inch box. In fact, I once did. I modified an exhaust on a Lamborghini Murcielago.
You did?
Yep. And the guy threw me the keys and said, "Pull my car in bits, do the exhaust, and put it all back together again." So that's exactly what I did. And basically I was horrified, because at the back of most of the Lamborghini Murcielago is made out of this stuff, right? And they hadn't even bothered. They'd MIG welded it, and they hadn't even got the spatter off the tubing. It was all underneath the bodywork. No Lamborghini owner is ever going to see it.
No.
But the guy that pulls it apart is going to be like, "Oh my God, no, don't do it."
It must have been made in Italy right before summer holidays.
Yeah, probably. And the thing was, it was covered in MIG spatter, right? And they just painted it. They hadn't even been bothered to clean it up. I mean, they used...
Before I get an angry email from Lamborghini, right, let's do what we're doing. Right, so this is on the inside of a bend. And when you have a bend, you have to have a tube that runs to that bend. Otherwise, it is what is referred to as in-bending. So here we have a bend, and we have a tube that runs to the inside of that bend, and we have another tube that runs to the inside of that bend.
Yep.
So it's not in bending. Here we have a tube and a tube to the inside and a gusset, and then that way it's not in bending. This is not a monocoque, but you still can't have tubing in bending. Anytime you have a T-piece like this, you're going to have force running into the middle of a tube, and that's no good.
No, except for one exception.
Go on.
Right, when we come to put these in, because we're going to put the inner sills in,
Yes.
we're also going to put one tube in
Yes.
here.
But that's
Right.
not in bending.
That's not in
Because
bending.
It's got no force going through
No,
it.
I know, and the fact is that because it's a kind of a side impact as well, if one of the other of the tubes gets hit, it spreads the load between both tubes
Yeah.
rather than one tube taking the hit.
Yes. And it stops the tubes being pulled apart. That's what it's there for. It's not actually in bending.
No.
It's got no force running through
No.
it. But that's it.
That's
But
it.
You can never ever have a tube in bending. So if you ever see somebody make a tube chassis car or something like that, and there's like a floaty bend, or there's like a zigzag, which is my favourite, where two bits don't line up, so they just like put a piece of tube in between them. That does nothing. That's just a spring, or at worst, like something that's gonna go. So what we have to do is join this bend and this bend with a piece of inch box.
Yep.
That's the longest introduction a piece of inch box has ever had.
Yeah. It's a very nice piece of inch box.
It's lovely.
Yeah.
You'd think we'd tidy up the bench.
Now,
a bit.
we'll tidy it up now. Come on. Can't have this on camera.
Right, this is bad. Citroen Diane spare fuel pump.
In fact, that'll be a video shortly.
Why are you going to swap it out?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. I just thought it was decoration.
No,
It's
no.
been on there that long. I'll put your fuel pump away, Carl. That's it. If you've ever wondered what's upstairs, it's storage. It's all Dad's bits.
Actually, it's none of our bits. It's all of his junk upstairs. He won't get rid of anything.
Did you just say it was all my junk upstairs?
Yeah,
Dare you, sir?
it is.
How dare you? Unsubstantiated lies.
No, I didn't. You take that camera. You take that camera
That
upstairs.
camera's never going up there,
Up there.
so and you got
Yes.
no proof. The other thing that's changed in this workshop, which it's been that long that I'd actually forgotten about, is we've finally got 4 wheels. It was a long and drawn out process, and it took a lot of polishing, and they actually need a clean now. It's been that long. But we have now officially have 4 wheels, because last time we only had 2. And we were moving 2 wheels about to make measurements and stuff, but now we finally have 4. So it won't be long until we're on 4 wheels. Spot on.
That's it. Yay.
While Dad works on his tabs, I'm going to leave him to think about it. And it's because it's a very fiddly job. It's partway between model making and actual engineering. I'm going to be cleaning up these rod ends because we are using the original factory MX5 rod ends that came with our mixed bag of NA and NB MX5 stuff. The NA and NB MX5 stuff is actually quite different from each other. There's a different hole pattern in the bottom arm, and in the top arm there's this little like gusset here that isn't there on the NA. It's much smaller. So we've got NA bottom arms because we've made our NB bottom arm into an NA bottom arm, and we've got NB top arms. But we're going to use the rod ends from our MX5 suspension, and we've got our bottom ball joints as well. But they're a bit greasy and a bit gross. There's nothing wrong with them. They're actually in really good condition. The only slight problem with them is that all the dust covers were all knackered and gross. So I've bought new dust covers, and I'm going to Y-brush them all up, degrease them all, prep them for paint, and then we're going to paint them with the same steelet as the rest of the chassis. So when we paint the chassis, we're going to give these top arms a proper coat of paint. We're going to give all our suspension stuff a good coat of paint and do all of this as well. And then that way, when it all goes together like new. We aren't using, I know there'll be people who haven't watched the Mirror Problems video who watch this. We aren't using the MX5 steering rack. We're using my mini steering rack that came with my GTN because it's a quick rack and you can get loads of different ratios. And my ratio just happens to be far faster than a standard MX5. And it's also made by, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's also made by the people who used to make Ferrari racks. Cam Gears Limited, thank you Dad. It's also made by Cam Gears Limited, who made Ferrari steering racks back in the day, which is quite a cool little touch. Like I said, there are far more glamorous jobs, but it all needs doing.
Right, so what we've done so far, we've made a gusset for here, and we're going to weld it round here and up both sides. That'll stop any forward or aft movement. We've done two gussets on the back, the same, one at one side, one at the other, stop any twisting. And now they'll be welded all the way around. We've got the centre bar in, which then links the two together, so any force hitting this side is transmitted across and the load's spread by the other side. We've also put these centre bars in, just to keep, in case of an accident. So basically if something hits you in the side, it can't split the bars apart. You know, maybe a bollard or a tree stump or whatever. So that we can weld these in place now. And that just stops, it spreads the load and makes both bars take the impact. So if one gets hit at the bottom, the top one takes the load as well. So basically it just spreads the load across parts of the chassis. Hopefully that's never going to happen, but in case it ever did, everybody's going to be safe.
You might be asking yourself, with us adding a piece of tubing in the door bars, why we aren't doing the same here. Because after all, this is a bit floaty. And the answer to that is that we have a bend here and we have a bend here. And if we join those two up with a piece of tube, you end up with a tube at a really oblique angle. And this one's okay because it's long enough that it's not oblique. But if we put a piece of tube here, this is ridiculously oblique. And tubing at an oblique angle doesn't really do that much. Like this is okay because it's in the direction that the strength needs to be. But this here is not in any sort of direction that any sort of strength needs to go. And that's an issue. So this is a perfect example of where using a piece of tubing isn't the right solution. Our solution for it is that in the future we're going to put a piece of steel in here that's going to form an inner wing panel. And rather than using like carbon fibre or fiberglass, we're going to use steel. And we'll weld it all in and we'll bead roll it so that it can join up all of these spots, and that way it is massively stronger than a piece of tubing would be. It'll be stiffer than a piece of tubing would be because it's two pieces of tubing joined at the hip, and then that way every single one of these gussets will also make these bends stronger. And it's a good way of solving like a few different problems with one very simple, very lightweight solution. The downside is we're going to have to make a bead roller. The time that many of you have been waiting for since like episode 6 is finally here. It's finally time to weld in our inner sill panels. I've been waiting for this since day one. And I can't wait. Now, if you're new here, we made these way back when. One of the first things we ever made for this car, even before the cage was like a proper cage. And we drilled them for lightness, both sills. And we also made a dimple die tool out of oak. This one. And so there's a video all about making our own dimple die tool and making these sills if you're interested in it. But basically, we took a floppy sheet of 1mm steel and turned it into something massively stiff and massively strong while making it lighter. And now it's time to weld them in. Now, these are our inner sill panels, but they'll also be welded to the cage because they are an inner sill panel and they add rigidity to the cage. And that's the entire essence of this roll cage, is that it's not really a roll cage, it's a frame for us to weld sheet metal to and to make panels in that will then make the cage or the tubular structure, which is what we should really call it, stronger. Because this is one massively stiff car. And that's hugely important to me because I'd rather drive a 1000 horsepower chassis with 250 brake horsepower than a 250 brake horsepower chassis with 1000 horsepower. First thing we have to do is trim them because in order for the holes to line up properly, they have to be wonky in the chassis in order to look straight. So when we bent them, this bottom edge needs trimming up because this bottom edge is straight, but isn't straight in the context of the chassis. It'll all make sense when it's in. And we have to cut this bit short because we're going to have firewall in here and there's something going here, so it can't have a dimple die in it. But we did it at the time because it looked good, cool, and we were doing it. So let's chop it down and weld it in, shall we? if you're watching this thinking, that looks like loads and loads and loads of work, yes. We want to make sure there's absolutely no oxidation of any kind on these panels. And there's like a couple of little teeny tiny little marks, so get rid, and that way we've got a good surface. So you get a really nice weld, but also once it's welded, it'll be really difficult to get in to clean. And of course we want to paint it directly after this, so.
Finger on the thing.
What?
That's
Yeah.
it.
You got it?
That's it.
Clunk, click, every trip. Don't smack yourself in the face. Oh, them big cable ties. What? No, there's a really big one upstairs. I could use one as a tyre swing and just use that instead of a carabiner. There's a massive one, I've been saving it forever. Right, if you tighten this all the way up, yeah, and pull it tight, that won't then pull up, will it?
It's a bit bloody tight.
We've done some redneck stuff, but this is pretty red. Oh crap, I can't push this down here now.
You should put another cable tie on.
We're just proving the old maxim right, aren't we? There's nothing you can't achieve with a liberal application of cable ties, duct tape and WD-40. Well, it doesn't touch. Okay. Are we going to wide shot this?
Well, just lift it up. Just
Yeah.
and then leave it like that for tonight.
Yeah. And if it's going to go dong, it will. This strong cable ties, I'd swing off one of them. I'm more than 67 kilos. Remember, it's a bit elastic, is that rope? So. Yeah. That's. Yeah. Ta-da! Good it ends off your cable ties. They're strong then, aren't they? We had to come up with a way of kind of suspending the chassis in a manner that touched in as few places as possible. And with liberal application of climbing equipment, some yacht pulleys and a couple of carabiners and some cable ties, we've got it. Who needs a spray booth? For those who are new, we're using Steelit 316, which is marine grade stainless steel paint. It's polyurethane with a load of stainless steel in it. And they use it for Baja pre-runner trucks, don't they, in America? Like trophy trucks, which are the big desert racing trucks. But in Europe, they sell it for like painting bridges and stuff like that, architectural outside stuff. Yeah. And we're using it really for its corrosion resistance, aren't we? Yeah. For its ability to take a kicking. Because there's no point doing all of this and then not protecting it really, really well. And they say you can weld through it.
Well, I've actually tried welding through it and it gives off an awful lot of fumes. So unless you're in a super well ventilated area, I don't advise you do that. In an emergency, yeah, okay, I'll agree with it's weld through. But when you try to weld, if you haven't cleaned it up and you're using, say, a MIG, it spatters everywhere till it's burnt through the paint. You get spatter everywhere. But after that, yeah, you can weld through it, but I wouldn't advise it.
If you're using a stick welder and you've got really long arms, it's not so bad.
Yeah.
And if you were in the desert in Mexico and your trophy truck comes in and it's got a crack in one of its trailing arms, because I know they use fabricated trailing arms and stuff, yeah, fair enough. Otherwise, no. But the good news is that we've done some tests. Some of you may remember we painted a corner, and we've also done some bits on the suspension. And you can knock it back and then paint over the top, yep. And it's not massively obvious, is it?
No, you can't even tell it's been painted in the first place.
No, it covers over itself really well, which is great news. And grey is not like the most interesting colour in the world. I know on social media I have made fun of many times people who buy paint to sample grey cars, because they're paying more to get this other grey so they can conform completely while like feeling superior to others because they paid slightly more for their grey. Grey is the most boring colour in the world, but it's a lot more inspectable than black, and with this stuff you get a choice of grey or black. Yep. And this is not the colour of the car, this is the colour of the chassis. And at the end of the day, we need to be able to inspect this.
The thing is, once the body goes on, you'll see very little of it.
Yeah, you will see almost nothing unless you're in it. But even the inner sills, like the inner sills on this side, on the inner car side, will be body colour eventually. Yeah. But all this stuff needs to be weather protected.
The reason we're painting it now with the outer sills off is so we can actually get into here to paint, and into here. Because obviously once this sill goes on, right, we can paint through the holes, but there's no way we can paint through the top. So basically, we're trying to do as much rust protection as possible, because the old chassis rotted from the inside out.
Yeah.
So it's important to us for that not to happen again. So if we went to all this trouble to make a completely new car, so it's not a kit car anymore, It is a brand new car.
Yeah.
So there's no point making a brand new car and letting it go rusty. So
Even the original one, I will defend the original one and say some were kit cars, some were factory made cars, and at the time pretty much everything was a kit car.
Yeah.
Even like Lotus Europas and stuff that people love and adore, and Lotus Elans, people forget they were available as kits.
Yeah.
You could buy an Elan as a thing and build it in your own garage. Yeah. But it's also the reason why these,
as you can now with Caterham.
as you can now with Caterham. But people think of Elans as like this fancy thing that's superior to a 7, don't they? But the reality is they were available as kits, so were Europas. But I love them for that, because it makes every single one different. Yeah. And this one will be unique again. Yeah. But it's also one of the reasons why we haven't welded bungs or anything on these bottoms of these tubes, and that's because we can actually paint now up inside the tubes. All of the tubes that we can leave open, we've left open, haven't we? Yeah. And that includes like the suspension arms and stuff like that. The rear trailing arms are all disassembled, and we've cut the end caps off so that we can spray down inside them. And then that way they're covered in stainless steel from the inside and the outside. So that in the future, if I ever drive it through a Ford, which, I mean, that happens. I've driven Jolene through a Ford twice. I wasn't supposed to, but I did. If there's ever flooding or something, and I don't have to worry about it, the water can go in one side and out the other, because rust is caused by trapped water, not getting wet, is it?
Yep. And what I'm saying, obviously, the air can blow straight through the trailing arms.
Yeah.
So they'll be dry in minutes.
Yeah. And this stuff will take a kicking, and that's why we're using it over anything. Well, Dad, yesterday when we finished painting, I said to you, we'll film the outro tomorrow in the morning because there'll be sun streaming through the windows.
And it's peeing down.
But it was a pig to do, wasn't it?
It is, and then later today I'm going to do it again. It's going to have a second coat.
We made a rod for our own back because it's so intricate and because it's all full of holes and stuff. It takes a really long time, and it's
worth taking the time to get the paint into all the little nooks and crannies so we don't get any rust in the future.
Yeah, and steel, it's not the easiest stuff in the world to paint because it's full of stainless steel powder. There's no point thinning it down, and you can't really thin it down, can you? So not only does it require loads more air, which our little tiny compressor can't really keep up with, but it also tends to block the gun, and it takes ages to paint.
Yeah, it's probably better. What we've done is taking the paint inside the house and actually warmed it up a little bit.
Yeah.
And that seems to work better.
Yeah. But it doesn't help that it's nice and cool in the workshop. No. It does cool down quickly. And now we have to leave it for ages to harden.
At least 5 to 10 days, so we're going to leave it at least 7 days.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I've waited so long for this video. Because this stuff, there's no rush in it. You can't... You
can't speed it up, you can't make it dry any quicker.
But I'm really happy with the finish. It looks superb, and it's amazing seeing it all one colour for the first time. And a lot of the detail that you previously didn't see, like inside of the engine mounts and stuff like that, stand out loads more than they previously did, which is nice to see. Yep. And it's been a long road getting here.
Thousands of hours of work. But hopefully all worth it.
it will look amazing when it gets its suspension, like when all those parts here behind get mounted to this and it gets its wheels on and it goes on the ground for the first time ever.
Yep, superb.
That's going to look fantastic. If you want to watch that video and you want a notification when that video arrives, make sure that you go down there and you click subscribe and you click the bell icon, because that's what they do. Or you can click my face to subscribe, because at the end of the video there'll be a button that looks like my face.
Yeah, and please leave a comment, because we're really, really happy to read all your comments. Good or bad.
But only good. Tell us what. I love our comment section. It's fantastic. We're one of the few communities on YouTube that has a really nice bunch of people that comments on our videos, and I'm really proud of that. So thank you, and thank you to everyone. I know I said it at the beginning of the video, but thank you to everybody who commented like throughout our absence. Sabbatical. I had sabbatical in my head. And I'm like, no, that's the wrong word. But yeah. Yeah, that was fantastic. So thank you to everyone who comments and stuff. Yeah. We read every single one. I know a lot of YouTubers say, oh, I don't read comments. My comments are awful. That's why. The comments are awful, because they're not a part of the community. Whereas we really take the time to make sure. And if you're interested in following us on social media, that's all down in the description, including a little Facebook group thing, which I made to stop people sending me photos of their cars. So don't email me photos of your cars. Instead, join the Facebook group and post them there, because all the lovely people in the comments are also in that Facebook group. There's a really nice little community and everybody's friendly, no matter what you're doing, whether it's stuff on your house or little projects or whatever, or even like there's one person that just like goes to flea markets and posts cool car stuff that's at flea markets. Yeah, good. And it's lovely. It's all your car nerd friends that you wish you had. So yeah, thank you all for watching. Please be awesome to each other, and we'll see you all in the next one. Bye bye.